Good morning. Good morning. There we go. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming. I know there's a ton of choice out there. There's some sessions with long lines. I nearly went to the SQL Fabric session. I just wanted to join the line because it looked so exciting. But trust me, we've got some great content for you today, all about Dell's offerings in the hybrid and private cloud space. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is McSpirit. I'm from Dell. I'm an engineering technologist and an Azure MVP. And I'm pleased to be joined by Rohit from Microsoft.
Hi, Rohit Tatachar. I'm with the Azure team.
Excellent. Now, what we want to cover today is a number of different things, a number of announcements, some key updates, and bring you up to speed with just what Dell is doing in a number of different important areas across private and hybrid cloud. So we're going to start by taking a quick look. I say quick look, it's famous last words. We're going to take a look at some of the investments Dell has made historically and then going forward in the area of Azure Local, which is something I hope everyone is pretty excited about, and we're going to bring you up to speed with some good stuff there. Then we're going to change gears a little bit and focus in on some of the stuff that's happening in Azure around our storage offerings. There's some compelling and incredibly cool technologies that could really change the game for you in Azure around how you manage storage and how you consume storage from your applications natively in Azure. And then we're going to round out the session by focusing on some of the protection technologies, security technologies, and how Dell can help you move forward with some of these exciting innovations. So let's get into it. Azure Local. How many people, by show of hands, are familiar with Azure Local? OK, so about a third or so, maybe slightly more. So for those that aren't, Azure Local is a different beast to what many of you are used to with traditional virtualization. And if many of you are on a journey now of exploring alternative options for your virtualized infrastructure, and if you approach Azure Local in the same way and treat it the same way as your existing virtualization infrastructure, you're destined for failure. You have to think about Azure Local differently. Azure Local is a cloud-connected, hybrid by design, hyper-converged infrastructure solution. Yes, it runs on-prem. Yes, it runs VMs, just like a traditional virtualization solution. But this is a lot more like Azure than it is your traditional virtualization solutions. And you have to think of it that way. If you start doing bake-offs and comparisons with what you've got today, it's going to fall short in some areas, but it's going to exceed and really innovate in different areas. So I urge you, if you are thinking about Azure Local, think differently. It is a great platform for VMs. It's got AKS built in, the Azure Kubernetes service. So inherently, it's a great platform, therefore, for Kubernetes-based workloads. And the on-ramp to embrace Kubernetes, it's in there by default. It's very simple. You don't need a PhD to deploy it. You can very easily embrace and step into Kubernetes as you grow your confidence in that area. And then in terms of getting workloads onto Azure Local, Azure Migrate has just been announced to hit GA, general availability, meaning you can now migrate virtual machine workloads from legacy Hyper-V and VMware onto Azure Local. But with Azure Local, how does it start to be different? Well, Azure Local, as I said, is a hyper-converged solution. It runs on-prem. Your data lives there, but you manage it from Azure. You deploy it from Azure. You update it from Azure. Azure is the control plane no matter where you've deployed these different Azure Local instances, in stores, in manufacturing sites, in core data centers or colos. So Azure is the control plane. And Azure Local inherits a lot of security innovations and capabilities from Azure as well. So just after a standard deployment of Azure Local, it is a lockdown box. 300+ security settings enabled by default, drift control to help prevent those changes from happening transparently. We all know it happens. So drift control helps to prevent that. Protection from the silicon through to the workload. Integration with Defender for Cloud to ensure that your security posture is kept strong throughout. There's a whole host of security focus been baked into this solution, including things like encryption and more. And then in terms of flexibility, you can start with Azure Local on a single node. I've had talks on the booth, at our Dell booth, 2 miles over there in the expo, that people are focused on one node deployments in different locations. That's a great starting point. Start small. Naturally, you sacrifice a little bit of redundancy by just having one node, but you can still get the full gamut of Azure Local experiences, even in that small, start small infrastructure, and grow up from there 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 nodes. And you can fit a lot of workloads on there. That's a lot of Azure stuff that you can run on there. And that is Microsoft's goal with Azure Local. Streamline and make it easy to bring down Azure services to run where you need them. That could be IaaS-based workloads, PaaS services, AI workloads. Microsoft is decoupling more and more Azure workloads from being locked in Microsoft data centers and enabling you to run them on platforms like Azure Local. And that's what we're really excited about, because it gives organizations the freedom to choose where the right place for the application and workload is. And that could be in an environment that can connect to Azure, so your Azure Local systems are tethered to Azure, or it could be an environment where they're disconnected from Azure, and you'd like that Azure experience in an air-gapped or a disconnected environment. These are investments Microsoft is making, and Dell is going hand in hand with Microsoft to really embrace those and help organizations like yours. Now, speaking of Dell and Azure Local, what have we been up to? Well, it has been a long-standing relationship, a long-standing journey that we've been on together. Azure Local was formerly Azure Stack HCI, which was released back in 2020. But Dell's journey with Microsoft in this software-defined infrastructure space actually spans a much longer timeline. 2017, Azure Stack Hub. Even before that, we had Windows Server software-defined solutions. So we've been working hand-in-hand, co-engineering solutions with Microsoft in this space for many, many years. And that culminated this year, 2025, with our Dell AX system for Azure Local. Many of you may know our AX nodes. Our AX system for Azure Local becoming a premier solution, which is Microsoft's highest tier of hardware category within their catalog. Now, if you're not familiar with Azure Local, it runs on validated, cataloged hardware. Sure, you can install it on any equipment, but to be fully supported by Microsoft and the OEM, you have to choose hardware from the catalog. And there are different tiers you can choose from. And the Premier Solution tier it's a big investment from any OEM. There's only a handful of us in there who deliver the best experiences for running Azure Local. And that starts with how careful and thoughtful we are about optimizing the Azure Local experience on our hardware. So we curate and fine-tune and pick the optimized hardware to run the Azure Local solution on. And we provide our golden images, or our optimized Azure Local images with our optimized drivers and firmware for you for your deployments. And for those deployments, you're using Microsoft's native management experiences. You're deploying this thing from the Azure portal. You're managing it from the Azure portal. But Dell's been very thoughtful about how we integrate with some of the core experiences that surround Azure Local. Many of you I know will be familiar with Azure Monitor for monitoring things in Azure. Well, Azure Local can be monitored by Azure Monitor, and our hardware can plug in to that monitoring experience, and so hardware alerts relating to CPU or memory, they can be bubbled up into the Azure portal in Azure Monitor. Very valuable, all centralized. And then from a governance perspective, you want to make sure that your systems are configured to adhere to best practices from a hardware perspective. And they ship from the factory like that, but best practices can change over time. And so with our Azure policy integration, you can start to see that as time goes by, our policy recommendations for our hardware, you can keep those up to date and ensure that you're aligned with Dell's best practices, all centralized in Azure policy, which many of you I'm sure are aware of and potentially using. But where is the rest of the value in our Premier solution? Well, it's the work that goes on behind the scenes. In our labs, in Microsoft labs, we have our hardware configurations installed, running, and they are being hammered. 24/7, continuously hammered with testing. New builds, preview builds, new drivers, preview firmware, and more are being rigorously tested both by Dell and by Microsoft. And if we find any issues, we fix them. And then only when that green light says, yep, everything has passed, this all looks good, do we make those updates available for you to apply to your systems. And so you're getting an incredibly reliable, well-tested platform for your workloads. And that upgrade process is all driven through Azure. So in the Azure portal, select all of your Azure Local instances, update, and within a couple of hours, you'll have the latest solution update from Microsoft or the latest drivers and firmware package applied from Dell, all through a centralized single process. And if things go wrong, and things do go wrong, then Dell is your single partner to work with to help you get things resolved. And if we can't fix it, we'll engage Microsoft for you to help get things fixed and back in the right direction. So 24/7 support, globally distributed from Dell. Now, that stuff today is all available. 16th generation AX systems, 660, the 760, our 1U and 2U models, and some ruggedized options as well. But I'm pleased to announce that coming in the not too distant future, we have our 17th generation AX systems. So the AX670 1U and the 770 2U. And those come with the latest Intel Xeon processors, their 6th generation, which brings a generational leap in performance, in capabilities around AI, virtualization, cloud-native applications, data processing, analytics, and more. But I think the big headline that people are really interested and curious about is support for the, to give it its full name, NVIDIA RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell Server Edition. We can just call it the B40. But this GPU is a jack of all trades. It does a huge number of different things. It's really been optimized with power efficiency, with scale. It's got some incredible capabilities around its vGPU and multi-instance GPU capabilities, meaning lots of virtual desktops or workloads can share that GPU simultaneously and gain benefit. But whether it's AI-related, scientific computing, 3D graphics, digital twins, visual computing, VDI, this card is going to do it all. There's a huge amount of capability in there. So we're excited about supporting that in our next generation of AX systems. So stay tuned for those in the next couple of months. Now, I mentioned earlier that Azure Local is a hyper-converged solution. You need to grow storage. You either fill it with more disk, and if you're full, then you need to add more compute nodes. That's how hyperconverge works. But it's a great platform for core workloads like we talked about, VMs, Kubernetes, modern Azure services coming to run down on-prem. But wouldn't it be great if we could expand Azure Local with external storage to give us a bit more flexibility, to disaggregate, to give us some options? Well, Microsoft actually announced at Ignite a very limited preview of external storage support with a handful of vendors, Dell included. But we've been doing this with Microsoft in production, supported for ages now. With Dell PowerFlex, you've been able to, for quite some time, attach external storage and present block storage to your Azure Local compute instances and host your workloads on there, meaning you can scale storage independently from compute. One PowerFlex can serve multiple Azure Local instances, which is a nice centralization of that storage. Support for diverse workloads, high-performance databases, and more. And that real high availability that PowerFlex provides is a real unique differentiator. So external storage might be new to Azure Local in terms of Ignite announcements, but it's not new to Dell and Microsoft. We've been doing it for quite some time. And we're going to continue to enhance that very shortly. Speaking of enhancing, Dell does not stop in terms of delivering the best experiences for platforms like Azure Local. And coming next year, we're continuing our advances in delivering the most complete and comprehensive experience for Azure Local by introducing support for Azure Local in Dell Private Cloud. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's Dell Private Cloud? That's something that's new to me. Tell me more. Well, we can certainly tell you more on the booth, but for now, let me bring you up to speed with the highlights. Before we get into Dell Private Cloud, though, it's important to understand a key component that contributes to Dell Private Cloud, and that's the automation platform. This is a unified management experience for your infrastructure. It's got a rich, intuitive, user-friendly portal, which you then have access to a catalog of validated by Dell blueprints. So think infrastructure as code. In addition, it can integrate with ITSM solutions and Dell AIOps for AI-driven observability. And then you use this automation platform to rapidly deploy your desired outcomes from that catalog, from that list of blueprints, through secure, zero-touch onboarding. So these outcomes, one of them is Dell Private Cloud. We'll talk about that in a few moments. You also have Dell AI solutions. Now, there is no easy button to deploy AI solutions. There's no like encompassing single red button, press it, and you've got AI. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of thought that has to go into it. So simplification is incredibly important. But with Dell AI solutions delivered by the automation platform and our blueprints, an increasing number of workload-specific blueprints, we're able to help you get your AI workloads up and running faster and easier on your Dell AI platforms using our validated configurations from Dell experts. And then we've got Native Edge, which offers a Dell native software and hardware experience, which is designed for your more diverse, remote, edge, small locations, with hardware and software all centrally deployed and managed through the automation platform. So this becomes the central brain to orchestrate, to deploy, to automate, to manage, to update all of those Dell infrastructure pieces, those outcomes. Now let's delve into the private cloud. I indicated that this itself was one outcome. It's actually multiple outcomes. Because within Dell Private Cloud, this is a fully transferable and reusable infrastructure. What does that mean? Well, at a high level, think about the building blocks: compute, PowerEdge, networking, and storage in the form of PowerStore. If you're not familiar with PowerStore is our flagship enterprise-grade, ultra-high performance, all-flash, highly resilient storage solution, which comes with an incredible data reduction capability, always-on data reduction capabilities that guarantee a 5-to-1 data reduction ratio. So incredible savings, efficiency, and optimization. And so that combination of PowerStore, PowerEdge, and Dell networking, underpinned by the automation platform, that's going to enable you to orchestrate and automate the deployment of your preferred choice of ecosystem software. So today, there's the Dell Private Cloud with VMware, enabling you to deploy vSphere as a blueprinted, orchestrated, automated deployment experience using the automation platform. In addition, Red Hat OpenShift is another option. So I choose from the catalog my preferred Red Hat OpenShift cluster, and the automation platform orchestrates imaging, iDRAC configuration, storage integration, network configuration, the whole 9 yards, end-to-end through an automated experience on that flexible, reusable infrastructure. Those two are available today. In the not-too-distant future, we'll bring in Nutanix, and then shortly after that, the headliner, in my opinion, I'm biased, is Azure Local. So the ability to deploy Azure Local onto this flexible, reusable, disaggregated architecture powered by the Dell automation platform, we're incredibly excited to bring that to market next year. And so that's going to be something that really streamlines how easy it is to deploy and onboard Azure Local quickly and in a standardized, orchestrated manner. And if you want to see it in action, tomorrow afternoon, late tomorrow afternoon, my peer Kenny Lowe will be delivering a demo, which won't be recorded, but you can see it, over in one of the theaters. So please check that out, because seeing it in action, a picture and a video and a demo will say 1,000 words. So stay tuned for that. But the beauty of the automation platform is it's giving us that centralized control plane, that orchestrated automation, not just for initial deployment, but ongoing management of these different outcomes, lifecycle management, and more. And it's all backed by Dell support, both hardware and the system software. So you're really gaining a comprehensive private cloud experience for that on-prem infrastructure. All right, now, let's change gears a little bit. So we've touched on a little bit of storage. I mentioned PowerFlex. I mentioned PowerStore. So that'll be supported with Azure Local when this goes live, which is awesome. But what about PowerScale? Powered by OneFS, it's our incredible scale-out file and object-based storage solution that's been around for many years. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with it. And it delivers a number of key capabilities for on-prem infrastructure and has for many years, whether that's quality of service, the data reduction guarantees, multiple protocol access over SMB and S3 and APIs, data replication and migration capabilities with SyncIQ, and more. All of these capabilities are part of PowerScale that's been around for many years, and many customers are embracing on-prem. But organizations are also looking to take advantage of some of those capabilities, all of those capabilities and more, in Azure. And so we've worked closely with Microsoft to provide organizations the opportunity now to embrace PowerScale technology, not just on-prem, but also in Azure, in two forms. Number one, I can take a customer-managed approach. I can deploy, I can get hold of the software, I can take the reins, and I can deploy PowerScale in Azure, in my own tenant, in my own virtual machines, and have full control, all the knobs and dials and bells and whistles, just like you have on-prem. Or I can take a simpler approach, and I can take advantage of a fully managed offering that sits within Azure and provides a more native PowerScale experience built in to the overall Azure experience. And so what we've got here is a set of great capabilities all around PowerScale. You've got choice around flexibility. Do I deploy this in a customer-managed experience? Do I deploy this in Azure as a native experience? And to take us through a little bit more about the more native Azure experience, I'm going to hand over to Rohit. Okay, there you go.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. As Matt mentioned, we're taking this collaboration partnership with Dell to the next level with the native integrations of PowerScale. So what does it actually mean? What does a native integration of the offering actually bring in? So to have a service available on Azure and really make that available as a native experience across your portal, across your CLIs, your APIs, it requires that service to be integrated into Azure's control plane with Azure's resource provider model. So we've actually collaborated, co-developed, and co-supported this offering that allows us to bring that level of control plane integrations into Azure's ecosystem. And with that level of control plane integration, essentially we extend that not just to the experience of using the service on the portal through CLIs, DKs, Python, whatever other mechanisms of interaction you have, but also how do you use that service, how do you interact with the billing. So all of that is seamlessly integrated with our Microsoft Marketplace. So you have one single point for your billing experience. And then the support comes, of course, with Dell being the frontier support and Microsoft backing that. So there are multiple different scenarios that this offering actually provides. So we'll use the next few slides to actually go through those different scenarios and talk about what is the value to you, the end customer. So what does a fully managed offering really mean? Matt mentioned earlier the two flavors of this offering. One is a customer managed, where you, the customer, is deploying within your tenant and you want granular control over the different aspects, but you also have to manage your compute, your infrastructure, and all those details that come with it. The fully managed offering allows for the infrastructure to be completely managed by Dell, supported by Microsoft. So it takes away all of those pain points of managing your infrastructure and just really focusing on the core business logic on your end. And this is now extended into the Azure's ecosystem via the native services. So this plugs into the control plane elements of Azure directly through the resource provider model. And what that allows is that experience of seamless integration, not just at a service level, but at the service-to-service authentication level, the ability to actually authenticate, authorize across different services. And this even extends down to Azure's MAC commitment, which is your commitment to use Azure consumption. So this service now can be directly attributed towards your MAC commitments. So it helps to draw down against any Azure commitments that you've signed up for. Putting all this aside, what does it actually provide? It provides higher performance and capacity, essentially allowing for the modern workloads. So your modern workloads could be ML-based workloads, move into the agentic workloads. You've heard this across, I'm sure, every session here at Ignite. Agents are here, they're here to stay, and we all have to prepare for it. So how do you take your data, which is the liquid gold, and really enable that to be ready for your AI ecosystems? This service also is available in multiple flavors of how you want to consume it. So there are different levels and plans that spans between standard to premium with different levels of commitment that is tailor-made for your choice. So it allows for all of this to be integrated, again, through Azure, through our marketplace offering, so you don't have to have separate billing plans enabled. You can leverage things that you already have with Azure Marketplace and use these different plans that help tailor it for your needs. And today, we have it available in regions within the US, but with GA, we will have this span across multiple Azure regions. There are 9 Azure regions that are planned that spans across 7 countries. And while all of this is available as a SaaS-based offering, I think some of the core pieces that come with namespace and multi-tenancy access is so seamless now because all of this is built in from an identity point of view into Azure's ecosystem. So you're using your intra-IDs, your authentication, your RBAC rules, all that will feel just like any other Azure service. So all this is deeply integrated into the PowerScale's native offering. And this extends your protocols. You could be using your SMB protocol or your more recent S3 protocols. All this support is directly provided out of the box as part of the larger native offering. And of course, the lifecycle management and the protection compliance that come with it is really core for an enterprise service. You want to make sure that the service is not just created and deployed, but then you have clear control over the lifecycle of the offering. And during that process are able to apply all your compliance and your guidelines. So all this, again, is managed through Azure's integrations, applicable through our RBAC rules and our governance protocols. So all this comes as an integrated package, just like any other Azure service. We talked about this a little in terms of what does it mean to be a customer managed service versus a Dell managed service. As Matt called out earlier, we're announcing the public preview of the Dell managed service as a native offering on Azure at Ignite. So it brings certain pieces that are kind of exclusive with this offering. As you can see, with the customer managed offering, you have access to the core compute levels, again, the persona of the user, really, the IT admins who require that access, who require that compute access is really where that's being targeted. But you do see the scale of what is being supported, the capacity of up to 5.5 petabytes on both of it, on both the customer managed and actually with the new offering, the managed offering, it goes up to 8.4 petabytes of support. So these two flavors really provide the ability for you, the customer, to deploy in any of your scenarios, depending on what you want, what granular support you need, and access to the fundamental infrastructure. So what is all this being used for, and where are the workloads that it actually is targeting? So be it a cloud burst scenario where you're using your workloads for ML-based operations, where your linear scaling is critical for your performance. Or, as we mentioned earlier, your AI workloads. How do you make sure that the data that you have is really available for your AI workloads? The integrations that we're building will just make this as seamless to ensure that the higher performance and the latency scenarios are actually automatically addressed as part of these larger integrations. And we do want to, this is a theme I'm sure you're hearing across Ignite, is how do you ensure these agentic workloads are set for production level quality? Here, the advantage is you're taking the data that you already have, your on-prem, and enabling that to run on Azure and an extension to run for the AI workload. So you've already strengthened all the data, applied all of the parameters on it as you've progressed along, and now you can confidently apply that and take that to your production scenarios. And as part of production, there is disaster recovery is a pretty critical scenario you need to address, and that also comes off the book in terms of your compliance, your security, all that packaged directly as part of the disaster recovery scenarios.
Okay, let's take it.
Now, a quick demo kind of to bring all of this together that summarizes what we've showcased so far.
Sorry, if we go back one, go back, and then go forward.
Okay, let's take a quick look at Dell PowerScale for Azure, the next evolution of scalable storage in the cloud. PowerScale for Azure is now available in the Microsoft Marketplace with both private and public offers, giving you the flexibility to deploy the way you want. Before we get started, let's walk through a few prerequisites. So first, make sure the Dell storage provider is enabled at the subscription level. This will come into play later when you dedicate your subnet. Next, create a virtual network or simply use an existing one. In this example, I will create a new virtual network. Then, from this virtual network, create a new subnet. Here is the key step. Dedicate this subnet to the service provider Dell.Storage. That ensures seamless access to your PowerScale cluster from your tenant. And that's it for the setup. Now let's move on to the deployment part. From the Azure Marketplace, choose your subscription and plan. Enter a name and your Dell reference ID. And then select the virtual network and subnet you just configured. And finally click Create. In most cases, the deployment takes under 4 hours. That includes cluster creation and all backend configurations. Once it's ready, you will landing on this PowerScale for Azure homepage. From here, open the PowerScale 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗶ecie webUI with a single click. If you have used PowerScale on-prem, you will feel right at home. The interface and experience are identical. Need help? You can reach Dell support directly from this landing page. Just click New Support Request and you will be taken to the support portal where you can log incident, service, or change requests and easily track existing tickets. You can also take advantage of Dell AIOps for end-to-end system monitoring. The onboarding process is fully automated, giving you the real-time visibility into health, capacity, and performance, all in one place. That's PowerScale for Azure, enterprise-grade storage, now natively integrated with Azure.
Excellent, there you go. So a huge amount of work has gone into bringing services like PowerScale or solutions like PowerScale into services now available in Azure. And it just represents that close engineering collaboration that's not just on-prem, but also natively in Azure. So we're doing a lot of work to really provide organizations with just choice and finding the right fit for their workload. And that is also true when we think about backup. Backup technologies on-prem, there's a lot of options out there for organizations. And many of you running traditional virtualization infrastructures, evaluating their next steps, are going to need to ensure that the backup technologies you have in place today or are evaluating work with your next generation of infrastructure that you're thinking about. And so at Dell, we've got solutions in market today for on-prem protection of workloads, one of which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, PPDM, or PowerProtect Data Manager. And this was recently updated to version 19.22, is the most recent release. And that brought a number of enhancements, including support for Azure Local. That was actually in a couple of builds prior. But Azure Local support with PPDM means that you can confidently protect your most important virtual machine workloads that are running on Azure Local using PPDM. And what was one of the big things that we had to achieve to make this work in an optimal way? Well, one of the things, and I urge you if you're evaluating backup technologies for Azure Local, something you have to discuss with your preferred backup vendor, which is hopefully Dell, but if not, please take this advice, is do they have a Windows Defender application control policy, a WDAC policy? Because Azure Local, as I said, is a very secured locked box by default, and it has something called WDAC enabled by default, which prevents software just being installed on the nodes and helps to protect that node, that infrastructure. WDAC is the enforcement layer that prevents that. Now, if you want to authorize software to run on the host, like agents for backup or agents for monitoring, a WDAC policy is required. Dell have done the due diligence and have made WDAC policies to make sure that our backup solutions and agents install correctly and run operationally correctly. That's not true of every solution out there. And some solutions, some backup solutions, they just say, oh, just turn off WDAC, you'll be fine. I said, well, That's not the ideal situation, is it? Disabling a security capability to let you install that backup agent, not ideal. So if you are engaging with backup vendors and they don't have that, just push them, because that's really important. Right? A number of them do have it now, but it is important to have that conversation, because the last thing you need is opening up a door onto your Azure Local infrastructure that could have easily been closed, and something that is easy to address from a backup vendor perspective. So make sure you do that. And that's not just backup vendors, that's any third-party software that you're going to run on Azure Local nodes directly. You want to make sure it's got a WDAC policy. Okay? And you can even write your own. It's not that difficult, so something to bear in mind. Now, that's PPDM on the Dell side, so that more traditional on-prem backup solution. But we've also been busy with Azure, again, with our PowerProtect backup services. This is a backup as a service, or a SaaS-based offering if you prefer, that helps you to protect workloads like Microsoft 365, hybrid workloads, so stuff that lives in Azure and stuff that lives on-prem, and Azure native workloads, Azure VMs, Azure Blob, Azure SQL, and more. So you're able, from one location, to protect both on-prem and Azure-based workloads, backing them up, protecting them into an Azure-based infrastructure backup solution, which we brand under our PowerProtect backup services. So whether it's deep security and separation of identity between tenants, advanced threat hunting and recovery, a low TCO, because we're doing some incredibly smart stuff around hardware management and helping you optimize costs from a protection perspective there. A number of key capabilities available in the PowerProtect backup services, and that's something that's been recently enhanced, and we're pleased to bring that to market and help organizations protect heterogeneous environments that span public clouds, not just Azure, but beyond, and also on-prem infrastructure. So definitely worth checking out if you're exploring your next-gen backup solutions. Now, we've talked about a lot. We've talked about backup. We've touched on storage, both on-prem in Azure. We've touched on Azure Local and a whole host of different things. There's a lot of stuff there, and it's complex, especially if you're coming from one quite distinct environment and all of this other stuff is new. And so how can you get help? Well, we've got a great ecosystem of partners out there, both with Microsoft partners and Dell partners who can help you. But we've also got Dell Services. Dell Services has a huge number of experts with a multitude of certifications to help organizations get to where they want to get to with some of these technologies. Azure-based solutions, on-prem-based solutions, private cloud, hybrid cloud. Dell's services organization is vastly experienced and can really help you move forward with your desired outcomes and your desired goals, whether it's AI-related, traditional virtualization, Kubernetes, and more. We do tons of workshops and have great feedback from customers who've worked with Dell Services, and we're globally distributed. So whatever your time zone may be, whatever your country, we've got people who'll be able to help you, not just from a proactive readiness and helping you to deploy, but also our support services, helping you to fix when things go wrong, getting parts to you quickly in case things need replacing with our globally distributed footprints that we have. So we're in the best place to really help you deploy, maintain, and manage this complex hybrid infrastructure set of solutions. And so we'd love to be your partner on your journey. And to help you and get a little bit more information, I urge you, get your phone out. We'll have the slides available, but there's a QR code. If you do want to read this ebook that helps you understand the Dell Professional Services and what we offer, there's a multi-cloud framework that we've built to help organizations traverse and navigate the different options out there and how Dell can help you embrace the right one for you. So that's one of the ebooks, and you'll have the slides, so you can always check them later as well, don't worry. And then another one, more specific to Azure Local. This ebook will take you through some of the offerings that Dell Professional Services have in this arena as well. So more pinpoint, more specific, but helping you on your path to embracing potentially Azure Local, or hopefully. Now, there's a couple of related sessions that I want to draw your attention to before we have a few minutes for questions. Big call out for the theater session that is tomorrow. It's a little bit late, it's on at 5:30, but it is definitely worth checking out because it won't be available on recording. But that one, the first to experience Dell Private Cloud deploying Azure Local, The things I talked about earlier, go and check it out and see it for yourself. So it's definitely worth checking out with Kenny. He'll take you through an end-to-end demo of some of those key components there. Lots of good stuff, interviews, sessions on demand. There's a CUBE interview as well. But all we've got to say now is thanks to Rohit as well for his support and the partnership. Thank you for your attendance. And if you have any questions, please come up to the mic or come to the front. And if you've got any more, we'll be at the booth over the next few days as well. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.